She had less than 3 minutes before the hounds picked up her scent. Rain lashed against the cobblestones, washing away the blood from her scraped knees, but it wouldn't wash away the target on her back. Cecilia Vane wasn't just running from a marriage, she was running from a death sentence disguised as a wedding. Shivering, soaked to the bone, she saw the only thing that looked safer than the dark alleyway, a black carriage bearing the crest of the most feared man in England. She didn't know she was trading one danger for another. She just prayed the Duke was as heartless as they said, because a heartless man might just be cruel enough to save her. The storm over the port city of Bristol was not a natural event. It was a deluge that felt like the heavens were trying to drown the sins of the aristocracy. For Cecilia Vane, the thunder was a blessing. It masked the sound of her boots hitting the wet pavement as she sprinted away from the Gantry estate. Her breath came in ragged, burning gasps. She clutched the thin woolen shawl tighter around her shoulders, though it was already soaked through. She could still hear the voice of her uncle, Earl Silas Gantry, echoing in her mind from an hour ago. "You will marry Lord Pembroke, Cecilia. I don't care if he's buried 3 wives already. His coin will settle my debts, and your silence will be bought with his ring." Pembroke, a man rumoured to beat his horses and his servants with equal enthusiasm. Cecilia knew that if she entered his house as a bride, she would leave it in a pine box. She turned a sharp corner, slipping on the slick mud. Far behind her, the heavy iron gates of the estate clanged open. Lanterns bobbed in the distance. They were coming. Desperation clawed at her throat. She needed to hide, but the streets were empty, the shops shuttered against the gale. Then she saw it. A carriage. It was immense, painted a lacquer black that seemed to swallow the dim street lamp light. It was parked outside the Whispering Griffin, a high-end inn that catered to travellers who preferred not to be seen. The horses, 4 massive nightmares of muscle and agitation, stomped their hooves against the mud, their breath pluming in the cold air. The driver was nowhere to be seen, likely inside securing a warm drink before the journey continued. Cecilia didn't think. She didn't weigh the morality of trespassing. She simply lunged. She scrambled up the step, her wet skirts heavy and tangling around her legs. She wrenched the door open. It moved on well-oiled hinges, silent as a secret. She threw herself inside and pulled the door shut, just as the sound of shouting men grew louder at the end of the street. The interior of the carriage was warm, smelling of expensive leather, pipe tobacco, and a hint of sandalwood. It was pitch black. Cecilia huddled on the floorboards, wedging herself into the small, dark gap between the opposing bench seats. She pulled her knees to her chest, trembling violently, trying to silence her chattering teeth. "Please," she begged a god she wasn't sure was listening. "Just let them pass." Minutes dragged like hours. She heard the shouts of her uncle's guards running past the inn, their boots heavy on the stones. "Check the alley," one shouted. "She can't have gone far." They were passing. A sob of relief caught in her throat. But then the carriage door opened. A blast of wind and rain swirled into the warm sanctuary. The carriage dipped significantly under a sudden weight. Cecilia froze. She pressed herself so far back into the shadows beneath the seat that her spine ground against the wood. A man entered. He moved with a heavy, predatory grace. He didn't sit immediately. He knocked on the roof of the carriage, 2 sharp raps. "Drive," a deep baritone voice commanded. It was a voice that sounded like gravel grinding under a velvet boot. The carriage lurched forward. Cecilia held her breath until her lungs burned. The man sat on the seat opposite her hiding spot. She could see his boots, polished black leather, splattered with fresh mud. They were large, expensive, and intimidating. For 10 minutes there was only the sound of the wheels clattering over the cobblestones and the rhythmic drumming of rain. Cecilia began to feel the faint hope that she might stay undiscovered until the next town. Then the voice spoke again. Calm, bored, dangerous. You can come out now, or I can run my sword through the gap under the seat just to be sure. It's your choice. Cecilia's heart stopped. She didn't move. Maybe he was bluffing. A metallic shing rang out, the sound of steel leaving a scabbard. The tip of a cane sword tapped the floorboard inches from her nose. I don't repeat myself, the man said. Slowly, shaking like a leaf in a gale, Cecilia crawled out. She rose to her knees, her soaked dress pooling around her, water dripping onto the pristine rug. She looked up, ready to beg for mercy. Lightning flashed, illuminating the interior of the carriage for a split second. She was staring into the eyes of Benedict Montrose, the Duke of Ashbourne. Every drop of blood drained from Cecilia's face. The Duke of Ashbourne was not known for his charity. He was known as the Iron Duke in Parliament, a man who had ruthlessly dismantled his political enemies and was rumoured to have shot a man in a duel over a spilled drink. He was devastatingly handsome, with sharp, angular features and eyes the colour of a stormy sea, but his expression was one of utter, cold indifference. He looked her over, his lip curling slightly in distaste. You're dripping on my upholstery, he said flatly. Your Grace, Cecilia whispered, her voice cracking. Please, I meant no harm. Trespassers rarely do, Benedict drawled. He sheathed the sword back into his cane with a click. You have 30 seconds to explain why I shouldn't throw you out into the mud before we reach the city limits. And do try not to lie. I detest liars almost as much as I detest damp skirts. I'm running for my life, Cecilia blurted out. Benedict raised an eyebrow. He leaned back, crossing his arms over his broad chest. Melodramatic. Who is chasing you? A jealous lover? A shopkeeper you stole from? My uncle, she said, the shame burning her cheeks. He intends to sell me. Benedict's eyes narrowed slightly. Sell you? To Lord Pemsroke. The name hung in the air between them. Benedict's posture changed instantly. The bored detachment vanished, replaced by a sharp, focused intensity. Pemsroke, Benedict repeated quietly. Yes, Cecilia said, tears finally spilling over. Please, Your Grace, if you put me out, his men will find me. I'd rather die in this carriage than go back to that house. Benedict stared at her. He looked at her tattered, wet dress, the bruises beginning to form on her wrists where the ropes had been before she managed to cut them, and the sheer terror in her eyes. He reached up and knocked on the roof again. The carriage began to slow. Cecilia let out a small, broken cry. No, please! Please don't stop! The carriage halted. Benedict reached for the door handle. Get out, he said. Please, she begged, grabbing the edge of his coat. I'll do anything. I'll be a servant. I'll work in the stables. Don't send me back. Benedict looked down at her hand on his coat, then back at her face. I said, get out, he said, his voice hard. So you can sit on the seat properly. You look ridiculous on the floor. Cecilia blinked, stunned. What? We have a long drive to Ashbourne Manor, Benedict said, opening the door and gesturing for the driver, who had appeared at the window. Giles, Benedict said to the driver, we have a guest. Bring the blanket from the trunk, and drive fast. I want to put as many miles between us and Bristol as possible before dawn. He looked back at Cecilia, who was still kneeling on the floor, stunned into silence. Well, he snapped, though the edge was gone from his voice. Sit up, and for God's sake, stop crying, it's annoying. The carriage rattled violently as the horses were whipped into a gallop. Inside, The atmosphere was thick with unspoken questions. Benedict had tossed a heavy wool blanket at Cecilia, which she had wrapped around herself like a cocoon. She sat on the velvet bench, her teeth finally ceasing their chattering, though her hands still trembled. Benedict ignored her for the first hour. He pulled a sheaf of papers from a leather satchel and read by the light of a small oil lamp fixed to the carriage wall. He seemed perfectly at ease, as if picking up stray, soaked women was a common Tuesday occurrence. Cecilia watched him from beneath her lashes. She knew she should be terrified. A single woman alone with a duke of his reputation was social suicide, and potentially dangerous. But compared to Pembroke, Benedict Montrose seemed like a guardian angel, albeit a grumpy one. "Stop staring," Benedict said without looking up from his papers. "It's rude." Cecilia flinched. "I apologize, Your Grace. I am just trying to understand." "Understand what? Why you helped me? You don't know me. I am a stranger, covered in mud." Benedict finally lowered the papers. He looked at her, his gaze piercing. "What is your name?" "Cecilia," she said softly. "Cecilia Vane." Benedict's eyes widened a fraction. "Vane, you are Silas Gantry's niece?" "Yes." He let out a short, dark laugh. Fate has a twisted sense of humor. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "I didn't save you out of the goodness of my heart, Miss Vane. I am not a hero in one of those penny dreadful novels. I saved you because you said the name Pembroke." "You know him?" "I know him," Benedict said, his voice dropping to a growl. "And I know your uncle. Silas Gantry is a leech. He gambled away your family fortune, didn't he? And now he needs Pembroke's money to keep his creditors from breaking his legs." Cecilia looked down at her hands. "He told me it was my duty to the family." "Duty?" Benedict scoffed. "Men like that use duty as a whip to enslave women like you." He paused, studying her. "If you marry Pembroke, he gains a seat on the Board of Trade, a seat he has been trying to buy for years. With that seat, he can push through tariffs that will ruin the tenant farmers in the north, including mine." Cecilia's eyes widened. "So, this is politics to you?" "Everything is politics, Miss Vane," Benedict said coldly. "By keeping you from him, I deny him the leverage he needs. You are not a damsel to me. You are a chess piece. Do not forget that." It was a harsh assessment, brutal in its honesty, but strangely, Cecilia preferred it. She understood transactions. She didn't understand kindness. "I accept those terms," Cecilia said, lifting her chin. "If I can be a thorn in my uncle's side, I will gladly be your chess piece." Benedict looked at her, really looked at her, for the first time. He saw the steel beneath the fear. A flicker of respect passed through his eyes. "Good," he said. "Because if we are caught, your uncle will have every legal right to drag you back. You are his ward. Kidnapping a ward of the peerage is a hanging offence. Then why risk it?" "Because I'm the Duke of Ashbourne," he said, with a touch of arrogance, "and I enjoy a challenge." Suddenly, the carriage swerved violently. The horses screamed. Cecilia was thrown across the carriage, landing hard against Benedict's chest. His arms came around her instinctively, hard and protective, steadying her. "Stay down," he hissed. The carriage ground to a halt. Outside, through the rain, came the sound of galloping hooves approaching from the rear. "Stand and deliver," a voice shouted. "Highwaymen," Cecilia whispered, her face pressed against the rough wool of his coat. "Worse," Benedict murmured, his hand moving to the cane sword again. "That's not a highwayman's call. That's a tracker." He pushed Cecilia gently but firmly back onto the seat and threw the heavy blanket completely over her, hiding her from view. "Do not make a sound," he commanded. no matter what you hear. If you speak, we both die." The carriage door was wrenched open from the outside. Rain lashed in again. A man stood there, holding a heavy pistol. He wore the livery of the local magistrate, but his eyes were wild and greedy. "Checking all carriages," the man grunted. "Runaway girl. Thief. Stole jewels from the Earl Gantry." Cecilia's heart hammered against her ribs. Thief? Her uncle had branded her a criminal to justify the hunt. Benedict didn't even flinch. He sat languidly, crossing one leg over the other, looking at the man with an expression of utter boredom. "Do you have any idea who I am?" Benedict asked softly. The man peered into the dark carriage. He saw the crest on the door, then the face of the man inside. He paled. Your Grace," the man stammered, lowering the pistol slightly. We have orders. Earl Gantry says—" "I do not care what Earl Gantry says," Benedict interrupted, his voice like a whip crack. "You have stopped a ducal carriage on the King's Road. You have pointed a weapon at a peer of the realm. Unless you wish to be stripped of your rank and thrown in Newgate by morning, you will lower that gun and vanish." The man hesitated. His eyes darted around the carriage interior. He looked at the pile of blankets in the corner. "What's under there?" the man asked suspiciously. Cecilia held her breath. Benedict didn't look at the blankets. He looked the man dead in the eye. "My hounds," Benedict lied smoothly. "They are sleeping, and they are significantly less patient than I am. Wake them, and I won't call them off." A low, menacing growl emanated from the carriage. The guard jumped back 3 feet. "Apologies, Your Grace. Go on, go on!" The guard slammed the door shut and slapped the side of the carriage. As the carriage lurched forward again, Cecilia threw off the blanket. She stared at Benedict in shock. You growled," she whispered. Benedict smoothed his coat, looking slightly embarrassed. A faint flush touched his high cheekbones. "I improvised," he muttered. "It was either that or stab him, and I didn't want to get blood on the rug." For the first time in what felt like a lifetime, a small, hysterical bubble of laughter escaped Cecilia's lips. She covered her mouth, shocked by the sound. Benedict looked at her. The corner of his mouth twitched. "Get some sleep, Miss Vane," he said, his voice softer this time. "We are entering my territory now. You are safe." Cecilia curled up on the seat, watching him. He went back to his papers, the Iron Duke, once more. But she knew better now. He had lied for her. He had growled for her. As the rhythm of the carriage lulled her into exhaustion, she realized that being a chess piece in Benedict Montrose's game might be the most dangerous thing she had ever done, not because of her uncle, but because she was already starting to trust him. Ashbourne Manor rose from the mist like a fortress carved from the night itself. It was not a welcoming home. It was a statement of power. Stone gargoyles leered from the eaves, and the windows were tall, narrow slits that seemed to watch Cecilia with suspicion as the carriage finally crunched over the gravel drive. When the carriage door opened, the rain had stopped, replaced by a biting wind that cut through Cecilia's damp clothes. Benedict stepped out first, extending a gloved hand. It was a formal gesture, devoid of warmth, yet when her fingers brushed his, she felt a strange jolt of electricity. "Welcome to the Lion's Den, Miss Vane," he murmured. They were met in the cavernous entrance hall by the housekeeper, Mrs. Caldwell. She was a woman of severe angles and grey silk, her face a mask of professional disapproval as she took in Cecilia's muddy hem and dishevelled hair. "Giles informed me we had a guest, Your Grace," Mrs. Caldwell said, her eyes flicking over Cecilia like a whip. "I did not realize she would be quite so distressed." "Miss Vane has had a difficult journey," Benedict said, stripping off his gloves. She will be staying indefinitely. Prepare the blue room, and have a bath drawn immediately. Burn these clothes, and have the seamstress here by mid-morning tomorrow. Burn them, Your Grace. Burn them, Benedict repeated, his voice brooking no argument. She enters this house with nothing from her past. Is that understood? Cecilia shivered, not just from the cold. Benedict was erasing her identity. It was protective, yes, but it also felt like possession. That night, Cecilia lay in a bed large enough for 4 people, staring at the velvet canopy. The room was luxurious, filled with French antiques and warmed by a roaring fire. But sleep eluded her. Every creak of the old house sounded like her uncle's footsteps. The next morning, the reality of her situation set in. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. She found Benedict in the library, a massive 2-story room smelling of old parchment and beeswax. He was standing by a desk cluttered with ledgers, his cravat loosened, looking exhausted. He didn't look up as she entered. "You slept poorly," he stated. "Is it that obvious?" Cecilia asked, smoothing the borrowed silk robe Mrs. Caldwell had provided. "You have shadows under your eyes darker than my conscience," Benedict quipped dryly. He tossed a heavy ledger onto the desk. "My steward is incompetent. The accounts for the tenant farms are a disaster, and I have a parliamentary hearing in 3 days regarding these very tariffs Pembroke is pushing. I don't have time to babysit a runaway heiress." Cecilia stepped forward, her curiosity piqued. She glanced at the open ledger. "The column on the left is off by £40, she said automatically. Benedict froze. He looked at the book, then at her. "I beg your pardon." "The grain yield calculations." She pointed a slender finger at the page. "You've carried the 7 incorrectly from the previous page, and the expense for the mill repairs is listed twice." Benedict stared at her. "You can read ledgers?" "My uncle didn't just gamble, Your Grace. He was lazy. He made me balance his books from the time I was 12 so he wouldn't have to hire a clerk. I know how to hide money, and I know how to find it." Benedict looked at her with a new expression. It wasn't pity, and it wasn't the distant arrogance of the night before. It was calculation. "Sit down," he commanded, pulling out a chair. For the next 4 hours they worked in tandem. It was the strangest intimacy Cecilia had ever known. There were no romantic overtures, no flowery words, just the scratching of quills and the rustle of paper. But as they dismantled the errors in the accounts, creating a weapon of data to use against Pembroke's tariff proposal, a silent bond formed. Benedict watched her work. She was sharp, ruthlessly efficient. She wasn't the weeping girl in the carriage anymore. She was a strategist. "You are wasted on needlepoint, Miss Vane," Benedict murmured as the clock chimed 2. "Survival requires versatility," she replied without looking up. Their truce was shattered by the sound of heavy doors slamming in the foyer. Shouting echoed up the corridor. Benedict stood abruptly, his face hardening into stone. "Stay here." He strode out of the library. Cecilia, heart pounding, crept to the door and peered through the crack. In the hallway, 3 men stood. They were covered in road dust. Leading them was a man Cecilia recognized with a jolt of terror, Arthur Penhaligon, her uncle's solicitor. A man known for his oily charm and absolute lack of morals. "We have a warrant, Your Grace," Penhaligon shouted, waving a piece of parchment. "Signed by the magistrate of Bristol. You are harboring a fugitive and a thief. Cecilia Vane is to be returned to the guardianship of Earl Gantry immediately." Benedict stood on the bottom step of the grand staircase, looking down at them like they were insects. "This is Ashbourne land," Benedict said, his voice quiet and deadly. "Your Bristol warrant is worth less than the paper it's scrawled on here. The law is the law, Penhaligon sneered. If you do not produce the girl, we will return with the militia. You may be a duke, but you cannot kidnap women. She is not kidnapped, Benedict said. She is employed. Penhaligon blinked. Employed? As what? A scullery maid? As my private secretary, Benedict lied smoothly. And as she is of age, she is free to work where she pleases. Now get off my marble before I have the hounds released. And this time, Penhaligon, they won't be imaginary. The solicitor flushed purple. This isn't over, Ashbourne. Lord Pembroke is on his way. He intends to collect his bride. The heavy oak doors slammed shut on the solicitor's threat. Benedict turned and looked up at the library door. He knew she was watching. He walked back up the stairs, his face grim. He pushed the library door open. Cecilia was backing away, her hands trembling. Pembroke is coming here? It seems so. You have to let me go, she whispered. I can't let you risk your title for me. If they find me here, if you leave now, they will catch you within the hour, Benedict snapped. He walked over to her, grabbing her shoulders. His grip was firm, grounding. Listen to me. They are playing a legal game. They are betting that I will buckle under the scandal. They don't know that scandal is my native tongue. But he called me a thief, Cecilia cried. They will say I seduced you. They will ruin your name. Benedict looked deep into her eyes. For a moment, the mask slipped. Let them talk. I have been alone in this house for 10 years, Cecilia. I have fought wolves in Parliament and vipers at court, but I have never had someone who could balance my books and understand my silence. He let go of her, stepping back, the wall going back up. Pembroke is coming to the harvest ball, Benedict announced. It's in 2 days. It's the largest gathering of the season. Everyone will be there. And? And you will be there too, Benedict said. On my arm. We are going to hide you in plain sight. If you appear terrified and hidden, you look guilty. If you appear as the honoured guest of the Duke of Ashbourne, untouchable and regal, they cannot touch you without insulting me. I can't, she stammered. I don't have a dress. I don't know how to be a duchess. You aren't a duchess yet, Benedict said, his voice dropping to a husky timbre that made her breath hitch. But by the time Pembroke arrives, you will be the most formidable woman in the room. I will make sure of it. The next 48 hours were a whirlwind of preparation that felt more like military drills than a beauty regimen. The seamstresses worked through the night, their needles flying over yards of emerald green silk, a colour Benedict had chosen personally. Green for the Vane family crest, he had said, but dark enough to match my own. Cecilia was drilled on etiquette, not the polite curtsies she had learned at finishing school, but the weaponized etiquette of the high nobility. Benedict taught her how to cut a man dead with a look, how to deflect an insult with a smile, and how to stand so that she appeared taller, stronger. They smell fear, Benedict instructed, as they practiced in the ballroom. Pembroke is a bully. If you cringe, he wins. You must look at him as if he is something you stepped in. I am terrified of him, Cecilia admitted, her voice small. Then look at me, Benedict said fiercely. When we walk into that room, you do not look at Pembroke. You look at me. I will be your anchor. The night of the harvest ball arrived. The driveway was clogged with carriages. The elite of the county had descended upon Ashbourne Manor, drawn by the rumours of the reclusive Duke and his mysterious houseguest. Cecilia stood at the top of the grand staircase. The emerald dress hugged her figure, the corset stiff and supportive. Diamonds, Benedict's family heirlooms, glittered at her throat. She felt like an impostor, a fraud wrapped in silk. Benedict waited at the bottom of the stairs. He wore formal black evening wear, the sash of his ducal order across his chest. When he looked up and saw her, his breath audibly caught. He didn't smile, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made her knees weak. He ascended the stairs to meet her halfway. "Ready?" he asked, offering his arm. "No," she whispered. "Good. Complacency gets you killed." They descended together. As they entered the ballroom, the chatter died instantly. Hundreds of eyes turned to them. The silence was deafening. Benedict led her through the crowd, his head high, daring anyone to speak. He introduced her to his allies, men of influence who looked at Cecilia with curiosity, but, seeing the Duke's protective stance, treated her with deferential respect. Then, the crowd parted near the terrace doors. Lord Pembroke stood there. He was a thick-set man with a face flushed from drink and eyes that looked like flat, dead coins. Beside him stood Earl Silas Gantry, Cecilia's uncle, looking nervous and sweating. The music stopped. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Pembroke walked forward, his cane tapping loudly on the floor. He stopped 3 feet from Benedict and Cecilia. "So," Pembroke boomed, his voice slurred but loud, "the rumors are true. The Iron Duke has taken to stealing other men's property." Benedict didn't flinch. "I see no property here, Pembroke, only a lady." "She is my betrothed," Pembroke shouted, spitting slightly, "and her uncle is here to claim her." Silas Gantry stepped forward, wringing his hands. "Cecilia, girl, come here at once. Stop this madness. You are making a scene." Cecilia felt the old panic rising, the urge to shrink away. She looked at Pembroke's cruel mouth, at her uncle's weak chin. Then she looked at Benedict. His jaw was set, his arm rock solid beneath her hand. "Look at me," he had said. She took a deep breath. She didn't let go of Benedict's arm. "I am not making a scene, Uncle," Cecilia said, her voice ringing out clear and steady, surprising even herself. "I am making a choice." "You have no choice," Pembroke snarled. He lunged forward, grabbing for her wrist. Benedict moved faster than thought. He didn't draw a weapon. He simply stepped in between them, his chest colliding with Pembroke, knocking the older man back. "Touch her," Benedict said, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that carried to the corners of the room. "And I will break your hand, in front of the Lord Lieutenant, the magistrate, and God himself." The room gasped. This was open warfare. Pembroke straightened his coat, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. "You threaten a peer?" "I threaten a brute," Benedict corrected. "She is a thief!" Silas Gantry cried out, trying to salvage the situation. "She stole the Vane family emeralds. She is a criminal." "She is wearing the Ashbourne diamonds," Benedict announced, his voice raising. "And as of this morning, she is under my personal protection as the archivist of the Ashbourne estate. If you wish to accuse a member of my household of theft, Gantry, you will do it through the House of Lords, and I assure you, I will counter-sue for the embezzlement of her dowry." Silas Gantry went pale. The mention of the dowry, money he had long since spent, silenced him instantly. Pembroke sneered, realizing he was losing the audience. The crowd was beginning to whisper, and the whispers were favoring the dashing Duke, not the drunk, aggressive lord. "You think you've won, Montrose," Pembroke hissed, leaning in close. "But accidents happen, estates burn, women disappear." It was a death threat, plain and simple. "Get out of my house," Benedict said. Pembroke turned on his heel and stormed out, Silas trailing behind him like a whipped dog. The music tentatively restarted. The adrenaline crashed through Cecilia, leaving her trembling. Benedict steered her quickly toward the French doors and out onto the balcony, away from the prying eyes. The cold night air hit her face. She gripped the stone railing, gasping for air. "You did it," Benedict said from behind her. He sounded winded, as if he had been the one running. "He threatened to kill you," Cecilia whispered, turning to face him. "He said accidents happen. He's a blustering fool. He's dangerous, Benedict." She used his Christian name for the first time. "I cannot stay here. I am putting a target on your back." "The target has been there for years," Benedict said, stepping closer. The moonlight washed over his sharp features, softening the harsh lines. "I have never cared if I lived or died, Cecilia." "Not until tonight." Cecilia's breath caught. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that when he reached for you," Benedict said, his voice rough with emotion, "I felt a fear I have never known. I realized that if he took you, the silence in this house would finally kill me." He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek. His thumb brushed over her skin, a touch so tender it made her ache. "I am not keeping you here for politics anymore," he confessed. "I am keeping you here because I cannot bear the thought of you leaving." Cecilia leaned into his touch, her eyes fluttering shut. "Benedict." He lowered his head, his lips hovering inches from hers. The tension was electric, a magnetic pull that had been building since the moment she tumbled into his carriage. But before their lips could touch, a shadow detached itself from the ivy-covered wall of the manor. Cecilia's eyes snapped open. She saw the glint of steel over Benedict's shoulder. "Benedict, move!" she screamed. She threw her weight against him, shoving him hard. A crossbow bolt whistled through the air, occupying the space where Benedict's head had been a second before. It slammed into the stone doorframe with a sickening crack. Benedict stumbled back, catching his balance. He spun around, his hand flying to the concealed dagger in his boot. "Assassin!" he roared. The figure in the shadows scrambled up the trellis, vanishing onto the roof. Benedict didn't pursue. He lunged for Cecilia, grabbing her arms, scanning her frantically. "Did it hit you? Are you hurt?" I'm fine," she gasped, clutching his lapels. It missed. Benedict looked at the bolt embedded in the stone, a heavy, military-grade quarrel intended to pierce armor. If she hadn't pushed him, he would be dead. He pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. His heart was hammering against hers like a trapped bird. "Pemstroke!" He growled into her hair. He didn't wait. He didn't wait at all. The war had begun. And now it wasn't just about a marriage or a tariff. It was a hunt. The echo of the crossbow bolt striking stone seemed to vibrate through the entire estate. Benedict didn't hesitate. He kicked the balcony door shut and dragged the heavy velvet drapes closed, plunging the room into semi-darkness. "Get down," he ordered, his voice stripped of all warmth. It was the voice of a commander on a battlefield. He grabbed Cecilia's hand and pulled her low to the ground, moving swiftly out of the ballroom and into the service corridors. Servants were running, panic spreading like wildfire as the guests in the main hall began to scream. The illusion of safety at Ashbourne Manor had been shattered. Benedict didn't stop until they reached the armory, a reinforced room in the basement. He shoved the heavy iron door shut and bolted it. Only then did he turn to her. "Let me see," he demanded, his hands shaking slightly as he checked her arms, her neck, her face. "I told you, I wasn't hit," Cecilia said, though her breath came in short, sharp gasps. "You pushed me," Benedict said, staring at her with a mixture of awe and fury. "You foolish, brave girl. You pushed me." "He was aiming for your heart," she replied. "And he could have put that bolt through your spine," Benedict roared, the fear finally exploding out of him. He paced the small room, running a hand through his hair. "I cannot protect you. I thought I could. I thought the title, the walls, the reputation, I thought it was enough. I was arrogant. He stopped pacing and looked at her. "You are leaving tonight. Giles will take the light carriage. He will drive you to the coast. I have a schooner in Dover that will take you to a convent in Brittany. You will be safe there." Cecilia straightened her spine. The terror was still there, cold in her stomach, but something else was rising to meet it. "No." Benedict froze. "Excuse me?" "I said no," Cecilia said, stepping forward. "I am not going to a convent. I am not running away while you stay here and fight my battles. Pembroke wants us both. If I leave, he will just hunt you down, and then he will come for me." "I can handle Pembroke," Benedict snapped. "Can you?" Cecilia challenged. "He just put an assassin on your roof during a ball. He has no fear of the law. And more importantly, Benedict, that bolt didn't come from the woods. It came from the trellis. Someone let the assassin inside the perimeter wall. Someone lowered the drawbridge or opened a gate." Benedict went still. The implication hung heavy in the air. "You have a traitor in the house," Cecilia whispered. Benedict's face turned to granite. He walked to the wall, took a heavy flintlock pistol from the rack, and checked the powder. "Stay here. I'm coming with you." "Cecilia." "I know the accounts," she interrupted. "If someone was bribed, there will be a trail, a sudden influx of coin, a debt paid off. You have the sword, Benedict, but I have the eyes." Benedict looked at her for a long moment. He saw the same resolve he had seen in the carriage, the refusal to be a victim. He nodded once, curtly. "Stay behind me. If I say run, you run." They moved through the house, like ghosts. The guests had been ushered out by the staff, carriages fleeing into the night. The house was locked down. Benedict summoned his head of security, Captain Mercer, to the study. Mercer was a bear of a man, a veteran of the Peninsular War who had served the Ashbourne family for 20 years. He stood at attention, his face pale. "We have swept the grounds, Your Grace," Mercer reported. "The assassin got away. We found footprints leading to the north wall." "The north wall is 20 feet high," Benedict said softly, leaning against his desk. "And the gate is locked from the inside. Who has the key, Mercer?" "I do, Your Grace, and the shift sergeant." "Bring me the shift roster," Benedict commanded. While Mercer went to fetch the logbook, Cecilia moved to the side desk where the household ledgers were kept. She opened the payroll book. Her fingers flew down the columns. She wasn't looking for the official numbers. She was looking for discrepancies she had noticed earlier but hadn't mentioned. "Benedict," she murmured. He was at her side instantly. "What is it?" "Captain Mercer's salary," she pointed. "It's standard. But look at the advance log. He hasn't taken an advance in 5 years. Yet 2 days ago, the day after I arrived, he paid off a lien on his brother's tavern in the village. I saw the note in the village correspondence pile." "How much was the lien?" £500, Cecilia said. "More than he earns in 3 years. Benedict's jaw tightened. "Mercer has a sick daughter. The treatment is expensive." The door opened. Captain Mercer returned with the roster. He looked nervous. Benedict didn't look at the book. He looked straight at his old friend. "How is your daughter, Mercer?" Mercer blinked. She is better, Your Grace. The new doctor is helping." "Expensive, these new doctors?" Benedict noted casually, his hand drifting toward the pistol on the desk. £500 expensive." Mercer went rigid. His hand twitched toward his sword hilt. "Don't," Benedict warned, leveling the pistol at Mercer's chest. "Don't make me kill you in front of her." Mercer slumped. The fight went out of him. He fell to his knees, burying his face in his hands. "They threatened her, Your Grace. Pembroke's men. They said if I didn't leave the north gate unbarred, they would burn the clinic down with her inside. I didn't know they would try to kill you. They said they just wanted the girl." Cecilia felt a wave of nausea. Her life had been the price for a child's safety. It was cruel, and it was efficient. Benedict walked around the desk. He looked down at the man who had taught him to ride a horse. The betrayal was a physical blow, but Benedict didn't show it. "You traded my life for hers," Benedict said quietly. "I understand why, but I cannot forgive it. Take me to the magistrate," Mercer wept. "No," Benedict said. "The magistrate is in Pembroke's pocket. If I send you there, you'll be dead by morning to keep you silent." Benedict grabbed a piece of paper and scribbled a note. "Take a horse. Go to the port. Get your daughter and go to America. If I ever see you in England again, Mercer, I will hang you myself." Mercer looked up, sobbing. "Your Grace." "Why?" "Because you were a good man once," Benedict said, turning his back. "Get out." As Mercer fled into the night, Cecilia watched Benedict. He was trembling, just slightly. "You let him go," she said softly. "He is useless to us now," Benedict said, his voice hollow. "But he told us something important. Pembroke is desperate. He isn't waiting for the wedding. He is trying to extract you by force. What do we do?" Benedict turned to the large map of London hanging on the wall. He took a dagger and stabbed it into a location in Mayfair. "We stop playing defense," Benedict said. "Pembroke thinks we are cowering here, waiting for the next attack. He thinks he has the upper hand because he has the leverage, your uncle's debts, and the political power. And he doesn't?" "No," Benedict said, a cold smile touching his lips. "Because Pembroke is a hoarder. He keeps records of everything, every bribe, every threat, every illegal tariff deal. If he paid Mercer off, there is a receipt. If he bribed the magistrate, there is a ledger." "Where?" "His townhouse in London," Benedict said. "He keeps a black safe in his private study. He calls it his insurance policy. If we can get that ledger, we don't just stop the marriage, Cecilia. We hang him for treason." "Breaking into the home of a lord?" Cecilia asked, her heart racing. "That's impossible." "For a duke?" Benedict agreed. "Yes. But for a thief and a rogue?" He looked at her, his eyes gleaming with a dangerous light. "Pack your things, Miss Vane. We are going to London, and we aren't taking the carriage." London's fog provided the perfect cover. Disguised as common labourers, Benedict and Cecilia slipped into Pembroke's townhouse, believing the Lord was at the opening of Parliament. They located the private study and the hidden safe behind a portrait. Benedict faltered at the complex lock, but Cecilia, recalling Pembroke's poor memory, spotted a sequence of numbers scrawled on the edge of a desk blotter. 41822, she whispered. Benedict spun the dial. The safe clicked open. Inside lay the black ledger, undeniable proof of Pembroke's treason. "Got you," Benedict breathed, grabbing the book. But the click of the safe was echoed by the click of the study door locking. Pembroke stepped from the shadows of the alcove, flanked by 3 armed thugs. "I knew you couldn't resist," Pembroke sneered, holding a lit oil lamp. "A thief to the end, Montrose." It was a trap. Pembroke didn't order an attack. He simply kicked over a table, smashing the lamp onto the brandy-soaked rug. A wall of fire erupted instantly, separating Benedict and Cecilia from the exit. "Let them burn," Pembroke commanded, backing out and bolting the heavy oak door. The heat was instantaneous and suffocating. "The window!" Benedict roared, smashing the glass with a heavy chair. The drop was terrifying, 2 stories down to the cobblestones, but the fire was roaring behind them. "Trust me," he yelled, grabbing her waist. They leapt together, plummeting through the smoke to crash into a haycart below. They scrambled out, gasping and bruised, but alive. As flames began to lick the roof of the townhouse, Benedict patted his coat. The ledger was safe. Pemsroke believed them dead, but they were already fading into the London mist, ready to deliver the final blow. Dawn was bleeding across the London sky when Benedict and Cecilia stumbled to the gates of St. James's Palace. They looked less like nobility and more like spectres risen from the grave, clothes scorched, faces masked in soot, breath coming in ragged clouds. The royal guards crossed their halberds instantly. "Halt! No beggars on the palace grounds!" Benedict straightened. Despite the ash in his hair and the blood on his shirt, the transformation was instantaneous. He did not plead. He commanded. He pulled the ducal signet ring from his pocket, holding it aloft. "I am Benedict Montrose, Duke of Ashbourne," he rasped, his voice cutting through the morning chill. "I bear evidence of treason. Stand aside, or answer to the king for barring his cousin." The gates groaned open. They were ushered into the private chambers, just as the king was breaking his fast. The arrival caused a scandal that would be whispered about for decades. But when Benedict slammed the charred black ledger onto the royal table, the whispers ceased. The evidence was damning. Pemsroke wasn't just a tyrant. He was stealing from the crown's own tariffs. By noon, the King's Guard had stormed Pemsroke's townhouse. They found the lord trying to flee to France with a chest of gold. He was dragged to the tower in chains, screaming curses that echoed through the streets. But his reign of terror was finally over. 3 months later, the scars on the land had healed. Ashbourne Manor was filled with light, the gargoyles seemingly less menacing under the spring sun. Cecilia stood on the balcony where the assassin's bolt had once struck. The stone had been repaired, leaving no trace of the fear that had almost consumed them. She wore a dress of pale blue, looking out over the estate she had helped save. Benedict stepped out behind her. The shadows that had haunted his eyes for years were gone, replaced by a warmth reserved only for her. "The architects finished the plans for the new library," he said softly, resting his hands on the railing beside hers. "I told them to add a desk for you, a permanent one." "I am not sure I am qualified," Cecilia teased gently. "I seem to have a reputation as a brawler now. The London papers are calling me the Duchess of the Decanter." Benedict laughed, a rich, free sound that made her heart soar. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Then let us make the title official," he whispered. "I don't need a secretary, Cecilia. I need the woman who saved my life. I need the only person who ever saw the man beneath the title." He dropped to one knee, opening the box. The vein emerald sat there, reset, reclaimed, and shining brighter than ever. "Cecilia Vane," the Iron Duke asked, his voice trembling just slightly, "will you marry me and make this fortress a home?" Tears pricked her eyes, but she didn't weep. She smiled, the same defiant, beautiful smile she had worn in the dark of his carriage. "Yes," she whispered, pulling him up to meet her lips. "But only if I still get to keep the books." Benedict kissed her, a seal on a promise that would last a lifetime. They had fled through the rain, fought through the fire, and survived the dark. Now, finally, they had found their way into the light. And that is the story of how a desperate escape turned into the romance of the century. Benedict and Cecilia proved that love isn't just about soft words and ballrooms. Sometimes it's about having the courage to fight back to back when the world is burning around you. They saved each other in every way a person can be saved. What did you think of Cecilia's bravery in the library? Would you have jumped out of that window? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, romance, and justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new story. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one.